Welcome to your new day.
This is Early Breakfast
on 702 and CapeTalk.
It's 5:15 now. Yesterday, the Public Protector Advocate Gcaleka gave a media briefing on a number of issues, including the latest on the investigation into the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. She found that more than 40,000 students were improperly funded, involving 5.1 billion rand, with the Public Protector indicating that the SIU found widespread fraud and improper payments in the student funding system. She asked a key question yesterday, whether or not this continues to be a machinery or vehicle that should be trusted to implement a government policy. Joining me on the line is DA Member of Parliament, Dr Delmaine Christians, who speaks on higher education and training. Delmaine, a very good morning and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you and the listeners.
I suppose the Public Protector's briefing yesterday shows that NSFAS is not the right vehicle for us to implement a government policy, is it?
Absolutely. It shows that we are in need of serious reform of NSFAS.
What should that reform be?
Well, firstly, as the Public Protector said, the symptoms show that we have a funding system that is no longer sustainable. NSFAS is in governance and administrative crisis. I mean, I'm sure you and the listeners have seen the new CPUT students are in crisis. They are sitting with huge amounts of debt. And ultimately, this has pushed the entire system into crisis. So, reportedly, universities owe billions. NSFAS tuition monies are outstanding. So, how the current model is working, we've seen, is absolutely not sustainable. So the reason why it's not sustainable is because of cash flow problems in NSFAS, in the NSFAS funding system. As the Public Protector has said, universities are unable to reconcile their financial data with institutions. So that is a huge current crisis. And I think what we need to do is we need to reform it to a more decentralized funding model. And how that would work is that essentially every single institution needs to handle their own funding system. So this simply means that, obviously we don't want to end government support for students. It's in great need. Students need that kind of financial assistance. But it does mean changing the machinery through which that support is being administered. And to do that, we need to change the NSFAS Act. So, and of course, national government would still retain responsibility for all policy, funding, oversight, accountability, or admin functions. Of course, then would move closer to institutions and students. Because at the end of the day, if you think about it, universities are best placed to handle this. Because universities and colleges know who is registered, they know who is studying, they know who needs accommodation, who needs additional support, and they are also aware of academic progression, students who don't progress, students who are carrying a subject, etc. And this proposed decentralization admin functions would reduce exactly this administrative backlog. And the Public Protector actually speaks about a system very similar to this, internationally benchmarking certain points to such an integrated system where responsibilities are allocated to public bodies like institutions.
One of the points she highlighted is that for the last 8 years, 4 of those years, NSFAS has been under administration. So organizationally, the structure is deficient, isn't it?
That's absolutely true. Yes, we are seeing a system that is just badly governed. So we've gone from administration to administration. Boards are dissolved, and now we've seen a board actually being brought back. But the truth is, you can't keep replacing one dysfunctional system with another dysfunctional system. So, the fundamental mechanism of NSFAS needs to change, and we are not looking at that. We are looking at replacing bodies of the same kind of system that hasn't been working for years. But you must remember that we are working now with 54 billion rand in NSFAS money and more than 800,000 students. So that has vastly increased over, the last 10, 15 years. So the current system cannot carry a system that is working with so many students, a growing system, growing pressure on universities and on NSFAS. So you can't work with exactly the same system, and the mechanisms are changing. Universities are changing. The type of student we are looking at, we are funding, is also changing, and their needs are also differing as the years go on.
We will have universities, South Africa, for example, lamenting the fact that the proportion of GDP that is allocated to grant funding to certainly public universities proportionately is diminishing year on year, right? And that places a lot of pressure on universities then to look for third stream sources of funding, which are generally grants and philanthropy and research funding and all of those kind of things. And the universities will also acknowledge that they're relying less and less on their ability to collect outstanding tuition fees. And therefore, what is happening at CPUT, there's an expectation that if you want to register next year, for those who are not NSFAS, you will pay an upfront, I think, 3,500 Rand for that, for tuition, an additional 3,500 Rand if you are going to be take up student accommodation. And you have to pay a percentage of whatever is owing for this year. And that is contributing to some of the really devastating protestation that we're seeing at the university at the moment. There used to be a world where government would provide sufficient grant funding to universities in order for universities to function. And should we not go back to that? So almost do away with NSFAS, allocate more, those billions of rands basically, amongst the 26 public universities and the TVET colleges, and make it conditional on those universities that a certain percentage of your student, your incoming student base should come from however you define it. And that will basically cover those households that do not have the necessary resources in order for them to go to university otherwise.
Yes, absolutely. I think you've touched on the crux of the problem here. The problem is that, essentially universities are unable to carry the cash flow consequences of NSFAS's failure indefinitely. So they need a certain amount of money to carry them on a year-to-year basis. Remember, universities have salaries, they have electricity, infrastructure, academic programs, etc. to pay for. So when money that is promised to them, owed to them through students, have not been transferred or does not arrive, this problem essentially becomes greater. And we've seen that this debt has just mounted year after year. And they are owed billions in rands by NSFAS. And eventually, this reaches the student, which is now the case at CPUT. And this is exactly why NSFAS is not the official vehicle that is able to carry the load anymore. And this is why this isn't just an accounting dispute between NSFAS and universities. Remember, the public protector also said or found that NSFAS's close-out project, which was supposed to reconcile financial data with institutions, started in 2021 already. And that remains incomplete. So that money is still owed. It's just money that's carried over from year to year. And you really cannot build a sustainable university system on money that institutions are owed, but that they can't, collect. And this is exactly why what you are saying is true. It needs to be decentralized. It needs to be given to universities. And, we are really saying that the current national admin structure is just not able to operate in its current form. So decentralization, doesn't mean that we are abandoning national funding or leaving poor students on their own. We are saying give greater responsibility and greater admin functions closer to the students, and that will solve the problem. It will prevent this kind of administration backlog. It will prevent the funding delays, and universities are best placed then to handle the money to see to it that their day-to-day activities can continue in a sustainable manner.
All right. What will Parliament do in the meantime, Delmaine?
Well, we are calling on the minister really to, firstly, comply with the public protector process. I think that's the most important thing. The minister has been given 30 days to come up with a final report. The minister will probably get some legal advice. Secondly, I think the minister should stop defending the status quo. He should confront the fact that there is a structural problem at NSFAS that cannot be fixed with one administration after another. And thirdly, give Parliament and students a sustainable and measurable plan. Where is his deadlines? Give us the costs that are needed. Clear the backlogs of universities. Where is clear accountability? Show us what you are going to do to institute that kind of clear accountability. So we are looking for the minister's remedial action plan. Within 30 days, we need his final report, as the public protector has said. And that, to establish just a kind of committee to drive the previous recommended reforms. And I think essentially for us, by the 1st of November 2026, submit the integrated plan, because come 2027 January, we cannot be sitting with the same problems. So we will hold him accountable for the deadlines as they appear in his final report.
All right. Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Delmaine Christians, Member of Parliament for the Democratic Alliance, speaking on higher education and training.